Somewhere in a private conversation Phil Mickelson never wanted made public, his wife said something that's now changing how this entire scandal gets read. 5 years of near-total silence since her last public appearance, 2 golf clubs he no longer belongs to, one family health matter that was never fully explained. Those aren't separate stories. They're the same story told in pieces. So here's the question worth sitting with before we go further. When a scandal breaks, whose words carry more weight? The spokesperson hired to manage the damage or the spouse who lived through it in silence? That message is coming. But first, you need to understand exactly what led to it. Not the rumors circling golf forums, not the speculation, the reported facts. Starting with a membership that got canceled and a wife who wasn't supposed to be the one who canceled it. Before we get into that, I want your honest take. Do you think a spouse's private actions become fair game once a scandal this size breaks? Or does loyalty still deserve some privacy? Drop your answer in the comments and subscribe if you want to see exactly how this unravels. That membership detail didn't come from nowhere. It came after months where Phil Mickelson had already gone quiet in a way that didn't match his career. He stepped back from Levy golf events, citing a family health matter, and stayed away from majors he'd normally never miss. No detail, no timeline. Just an explanation vague enough to end questions before they started. Amy Mickelson went quieter still. She hasn't made a real public appearance since the 2021 Ryder Cup. No interviews, no statements in her own words, nothing beyond what's been relayed through representatives. For a marriage that spent decades in the spotlight together, that kind of silence stands out. And silence is exactly what lets speculation fill the gap. When a public figure disappears without explanation, golf media doesn't wait for clarity. It builds its own version of events, which is precisely what happened here long before Amy's name was ever tied to a club membership. It would be easy to assume this was just another golf star going quiet during a rough patch, one more retreat from the public eye that fades in a few weeks. That assumption didn't survive what came out next. The assumption didn't survive what came out. Alan Shipnuck's report, published June 26th, put a specific claim on the record. Amy personally requested that Phil's membership at the Madison Club be canceled. Not a quiet mutual decision, a request made by her that ended his standing at the club. The report went further. It tied Amy to his departure from another club entirely, the Bridges, suggesting this wasn't an isolated incident, but a pattern of her stepping in to end his access somewhere. To understand why that detail lands so hard, you have to understand what a private club membership actually represents. It's not just green fees and tee times, it's identity, status, a controlled social circle built over years. Getting removed isn't like canceling a subscription. It's being erased from a world you spent decades building your place inside. And that's not something a club revokes lightly. It typically takes a serious complaint, a serious relationship, or someone with enough standing to make the request stick. A spouse fits only one of those categories. So now you've got 2 possible readings sitting side by side. 1, a wife protecting her family by cutting off exactly the access that was enabling the problem. 2, something closer to retaliation, playing out through institutions instead of the conversation. Neither one stays simple once the surface. Members at the club described something far more intimate than a membership dispute. Amy tracking his location while he was supposedly out playing around. According to those accounts, Phil found a workaround. He'd hand his phone off to whoever he was playing with or to an employee near the pro shop, then catch up with his group later on the back nine. To anyone checking a location app, it looked exactly like he was exactly where he said he'd be. One member described it plainly. It wasn't just staff he handed his phone to. It was other members too, casually, like it was a normal request between guys on a golf course, which means this wasn't a single lapse. It was routine enough that people around him treated it as unremarkable. Eventually, accounts say, Amy figured out what was happening. And once you know that detail, the Madison Club story reads completely differently. That membership cancellation wasn't a reaction to one bad moment. It was the response to something she'd already caught happening for a while, which brings everything back to the question sitting underneath this whole story. What does a wife do with that kind of information once she's confirmed it's true? Reportedly, she put it in writing. Before we get into what that writing actually said, I want to know where you land on this. If you found out your spouse was quietly working around institutions to protect the family without ever making it public themselves, does that count as loyalty, or does it cross into something else? Comment your honest take below. And if this kind of breakdown is what keeps you coming back to this channel, subscribe now so you don't miss how this resolves. Reportedly, she put it in writing, and that's where the story stops being about a phone and a golf club and starts being about words on a page. Once Shipnuck's report went public, Phil's team didn't stay quiet. His spokesperson pushed back directly, saying Amy is not a public figure, that she did not choose this spotlight, and that there was no legitimate journalistic reason to drag her into it. The statement went further, calling the idea that Amy orchestrated his club removals flatly false. Scratch Golf, the outlet behind Shipnuck's reporting, didn't let that stand. Their response was direct. The assertion that Amy Mickelson is a private figure is wrong. She is certainly a public figure. Two organizations on the record calling each other's version of events false. That's the moment this stopped being a rumor with anonymous club members whispering in the background. It became two camps issuing formal, competing statements about whether a wife's private actions even count as private anymore. And notice what's actually being argued here. Nobody's disputing that Amy requested the cancellation. Nobody's disputing the phone. The entire fight is over whether she gets to have that happen quietly or whether marrying a public figure means her private choices become public record the moment they matter. That's a genuinely uncomfortable question, and it's one golf media hasn't had to answer before because it's never had a spouse's private intervention become the headline instead of the golfer's own conduct. One more direction nobody expected, away from Phil and Amy entirely and toward the system built around them. Because strip away the names for a second. What actually happened here is that a private institution, a golf club, became the mechanism through which a marital conflict got resolved. Not a conversation, not therapy, a membership cancellation processed through club administration, the same way you'd end a gym contract. That's worth sitting with. Private clubs like Madison and the Bridges exist specifically to keep outside noise out. They're built on discretion. That's the entire product they sell to members. Yet here, the club became the tool for handling something deeply personal, and then the mechanism through which that personal conflict became public record anyway. Add the PR machinery on top. A spokesperson's job is to control a narrative, not to represent the truth of a marriage. Scratch Golf's job is to defend its reporting, not to referee a family's privacy. Neither institution is built to answer the question actually at stake here. What a wife is allowed to do quietly when she's protecting her family versus what becomes everyone's business once her husband is famous enough. So the uncomfortable part isn't really Amy's decision or even Phil's conduct. It's that neither of them got to keep this contained. The systems around fame, clubs, representatives, media outlets took a private reckoning and ran it through channels built for headlines, not healing. And that system was already primed to do exactly that, because this wasn't the only allegation sitting on Phil's plate. Sitting on his plate, because the Madison Club story wasn't happening in isolation. Around the same time, Golf Digest reported that Phil had been removed from the Farms Golf Club near Rancho Santa Fe over allegations of unwanted physical contact with a female employee. His representative called it a misunderstanding that had already been cleared up. Then came a separate claim entirely. Pat Perez's ex-wife, Ashley Perez, alleging Phil had once shown her an explicit photo and propositioned her years earlier. 3 separate threads, 3 separate institutions, all converging on the same 6-month window. A club membership pulled by his own wife, a second club removal over employee misconduct, a resurfaced allegation from someone completely outside his marriage, and in the middle of all 3, Phil's team released a statement about Amy specifically, that she was supporting him with extraordinary grace and unwavering love. Read that statement next to everything else you now know, and it stops looking simple. Is that grace real? A wife choosing loyalty despite everything she's apparently already confirmed and acted on? Or is it the most useful sentence his PR team could put in front of reporters right when three separate scandals were converging at once? Notice, neither reading cancels out what you already learned. She still requested that cancellation. She still tracked his phone. Those facts don't disappear just because a spokesperson later described her as standing by him with grace. Both things can be true at once. A wife who acted decisively when she found out, and a wife choosing afterward to stay. Which one you believe says less about Amy Mickelson than it does about what you think loyalty is actually supposed to look like? What loyalty is supposed to look like? That question is really where this whole story started. Go back to the beginning. A wife's private word allegedly weighing more than anything a spokesperson could put in a statement. That was the claim this video opened on. And now you've seen exactly what that word looked like in practice. A canceled membership, a tracked phone, a public dispute over whether any of it was ever hers to keep private. So here's where it lands. Amy Mickelson didn't leak a message to hurt her husband. If these reports are accurate, she used the only leverage she had, quietly through institutions without ever making a public statement of her own, to respond to something she'd already confirmed. Whether that reads as protection or retaliation depends entirely on what you think a spouse owes a marriage once trust breaks. That's not a question golf statistics or PR statements can answer for you. So tell me what you think. Comment below, and while you're there, tell me where you're watching from. City, country, doesn't matter. I want to know exactly how far this story is traveling. And if you want to see exactly how the next controversy like this gets unpacked, subscribe, because there's always another one.